Blackhawks with a sleepy offensive performance in Seattle. I'll go over the forward line issues that Luke Richardson has.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just a reminder, per usual, to go and hit that like button. Comment down below as well as to your reaction to the Blackhawks' 3-1 loss in Seattle last night, and also what you think Coach Luke Richardson should do next to get this forward group going. Be sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well if you haven't done so already. Even if you're someone who regularly listens through an audio platform, please make sure you jump on over to YouTube to hit that button for me real quick. It's 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really does help me and the show out tremendously. It's the best way for you all to show some support. And last but certainly not least, got to let you all know as well, today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, go and check out FanDuel.com and you'll have the chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet cashes with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Frustrating 3-1 loss for the Hawks last night to the Seattle Kraken, as their inability to string together consecutive victories continues to elude them, and the offense remains frustratingly ice cold. And quite honestly, Blackhawks fans, it was a game script that we've already seen numerous times here early on in the season, and because of that, because of the real lacking offensive firepower and even the lack of looking like a competent offense is becoming a nightly problem. As I'll talk about during segment 2, a lot of eyes and a lot of fingers are starting to veer towards head coach Luke Richardson. It's because it feels like we're stuck in doomsday. We're stuck in Groundhog's Day, I should say. We're seeing the same thing night in and night out. Tell me if this sounds familiar, Blackhawks fans. Nothing going for this Hawks offense in the opening 20 minutes whatsoever. They only mustered up 4 shots on goal. Seattle ran out to a 1-0 lead with a goal from Matty Beniers. The second period, the ice tilted in Seattle's favor even more. The Blackhawks, I think, had 5 shots on goal at the midway point of this game, but they were still alive going into the third period thanks to yet another spectacular performance out of Petr Mrazek, who continues to play outstanding to give his team a chance basically every time he's in the net. And Mrazek has been so good that I'm actually going to dedicate segment 3 of today's episode to him entirely, where I'll dive through some of his numbers and why he's been the MVP of the Blackhawks again here through their first 17 games. Be sure to stick around to hear more on Petr Mrazek during segment 3. But because of Mrazek, the Blackhawks only trailed 1-0 going into the third period, despite looking rather lifeless offensively. But then they gave up a backbreaker in the opening minutes of the third. Jaden Schwartz on the power play doubles Seattle's lead, which, by the way, I do got to add here real quick. Since I've been doing the show, I've never really come on here and given it to the officials, but I swear, I have never seen so many bad calls through a small stretch of games, the first 17 that we've seen this year, than I have this season. I mean, the officiating has been awful. And for the Blackhawks, lone power play opportunity of the game last night to get negated 10 to 15 seconds in because of that interference call against Seth Jones. It just made me absolutely want to rip my hair out. And then because, of course, Seattle goes and capitalizes on their man advantage to double their lead to 2-0. To be fair, it was also because of some really bad defense by TJ Brody on the outside, letting Chandler Stevenson walk right by him, and Wyatt Kaiser with the epitome of puck watching right in front of goalie Petr Mrazek. That put the Blackhawks in a tough spot, down 2-0 in the third period. But they did come with the strong fight late. Ryan Donato, the new certified goal scorer with his team-leading 8th goal of the season. Heck of an effort to follow up on his own shot and find the back of the net to cut the Blackhawks deficit in half. But unfortunately, wound up being too little too late, a statement I've said many times already here on the show. And the Blackhawks unable to win a second consecutive game once again as they fall 3-1 to the Kraken out at Climate Pledge Arena. As far as what went wrong for the Blackhawks in this game, I've already kind of touched on it for the most part, as it was a pretty simple game to break down, but the opening 40 minutes, it's not, I would say, a nightly issue for the Blackhawks, but it kind of feels like every other game at this point in time where the Blackhawks just don't do anything in the opening 40 minutes and then start to get going, but it winds up being too late. The Hawks had only 10 shots on goal total through the opening two periods. They only generated 8 scoring chances in all situations, not just even strength. Well, I guess they only had one power play opportunity, and as I mentioned, it was only 15 seconds, so most of the game for them was at 5-on-5, but only 8 scoring chances for in all situations through 40 minutes, only 2 high danger chances through 40 minutes. Yuck. Blackhawks offense with a real sleepy performance in the opening 40 in Seattle, and for the majority of the game, they just weren't able to get anything set up in the offensive zone, and that's another theme that's been way too prevalent thus far this year that has people looking at head coach Luke Richardson, because even Connor Bedard, no matter who they're throwing up there on the top line with him, it feels like they're not able to get anything going or not able to get anything set up in the offensive zone. And what also plagued the Blackhawks last night is when they did get scoring chances, it seemed like they missed the net on all of their best ones. Connor Bedard had a great opportunity in the first period to break this little mini goal scoring slump that he's on. What did he do? He fired the puck up over the net. His other best opportunity in the game, I thought, in the third period, he also missed the net on that opportunity. And I feel like Connor Bedard, and I'm sure this is easy to do as a 19-year-old who's snake bitten the way that he is, he's trying to get a little bit too cute right now. He's trying to put it in that top corner to beat the goaltender perfectly. But quite honestly, that's sometimes what kind of compounds issues for players who are snake bitten, right? Like sometimes it's the simpler the better. And I think Connor Bedard just needs to keep it simple. Get the puck on net. And also maybe take a play out of the Patty Kane playbook. Maybe start going low glove, low blocker, 5-hole. I think Bedard needs to mix up his shot selection a little bit in terms of where he's putting the puck, because it feels like he's either trying to go high glove like 80% of the time, it feels like. The other times that maybe he's trying to go blocker side or through one of the armpits. But I think he needs to do himself a favor and just dumb it down a little bit, kid. Stop trying to pick top corner. Stop trying to score the highlight reel goal and just get pucks on net. Look at how Ryan Donato scored his goal tonight, and look how he scored a lot of his goals this year. None of them have been like real fancy howitzers, maybe one, maybe two, but a lot of it has just been through hard work and making the smart play. Connor Bedard, I think, needs to get back to that in order to help himself get off this little goal-scoring schneid that he's on right now. But Tyler Bertuzzi was also guilty of firing the puck over the net on his best opportunity of the night. He had an odd man rush in the opening 20 minutes, wound up with 0 shots on goal for the game. Not good enough. Philip Kurashev wound up with no shots on goal for the game. And I'm sure some of you remember in my preview that I dropped yesterday, one of my keys to victory was for Philip Kurashev to build off of his overtime game winner that he had against Minnesota. Nope, did not do that. He was a ghost for most of the night last night on the top line with Connor Bedard, who, by the way, did play the center ice position. I saw Charlie Roumeliotis, who I'm going to throw under the bus a little bit here, in his lines tweet, put out that Bedard was on the wing. But quite honestly, I wouldn't hate to see Connor Bedard on the wing. And I'll actually talk more about that here in segment 2 in just a moment. But Philip Kurashev was on the wing. Connor Bedard was still playing center, even though he's not strictly taking all of the faceoffs and they're moving him around a little bit. But Kurashev, no shots on goal. Hugely disappointing. Taylor Hall only had 1 shot on goal. It feels like the desire to get the puck on net and like the desperation that the Blackhawks provide in the third period, they need to provide that earlier. They need to play with desperation right from the opening puck drop. And the lack of that message getting through and the fact that we're seeing the same thing time and time again, that has a lot of people, including me, starting to look at Luke Richardson like, what's going on here? Do we have any solutions? I'll talk more about what I think my solutions for this offensive problem that the Blackhawks have right now. Coming up in just a moment here in segment 2, there are my quick thoughts from the Blackhawks' frustrating loss last night to the Kraken. I'll throw my opinion on Luke Richardson's forward lines issue and how to fix this struggling Blackhawks offense when I return here in just a moment. But first, I got to talk to you all about a new sponsor here on the Locked On Podcast Network, which is Omaha Steaks. And nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. And this year you can skip out on the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And with 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it so easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at just $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, you can save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our viewers and listeners get an extra 30% off with the promo code NHL, as well as a $30 reward card when you happen to shop early. So make sure to go and take advantage of these amazing offers. 50% off at omahasteaks.com, as well as an extra $30 off when you use the promo code NHL. Minimum purchase apply. Go and get the best Christmas gift out there at omahasteaks.com. I also got to talk to you all about SelectQuote, the World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance today, because they can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. And in sports, winning is everything. That's why you always need a good strategy to keep you moving towards the goalposts. Winning strategies for life are just as important. That's why on my team, I have life insurance through SelectQuote to protect my legacy and my family's financial future. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Again, go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Now for your second listen, be sure to go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast so that you can become fantasy hockey experts over your league mates by getting daily tips from Steal and Flip. And you can easily find the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast down in the description, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2 with the Blackhawks offense struggling the way that it is right now, and that being a consistent theme here through the opening 17 games. As I mentioned during segment 1, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of fingers are starting to veer towards Blackhawks head coach of Luke Richardson because of a lot of different things. The lack of adjustments in the middle of the game, the lack of messages seemingly being sent to the team. I mean, when you're seeing the same thing over and over and over again, it feels like the message is kind of fallen at least a little stale, right? Like, I know the Blackhawks roster still isn't top tier in the NHL or anything, but for them to get dominated the way they are in terms of puck possession and to not look like a competent offense basically on a nightly basis, like, it is absolutely concerning at this point in time, as well as the lack of getting Connor Bedard going. I mean, we're 17 games into the season, Blackhawks fans. We're almost a fourth of the way into the year. We're getting closer to that Thanksgiving mark that everyone and all these players always talk about, where you have that realization, that understanding of what your team is at this point in time. Once you reach Thanksgiving, that's kind of that moment. Well, we're getting real close to that, Blackhawks fans. And not only does this Blackhawks offense still have no identity, Luke Richardson still hasn't even gotten Connor Bedard a consistent line mate. I mean, the amount of juggling that's going on with these forward lines right now it's out of control, and it needs to have a solution instead of let's just try this tonight. Let's just try this tonight. Let's just try this period. Connor Bedard, I think, had 5. Shout out to the Ringside General for all the great content that he does on YouTube as well as on social media. He posted last night that he counted Connor Bedard having 5 sets of different line mates in a single game. I mean, listen, I'm here for tinkering from time to time to try and find something new, but the amount of tinkering that's going on, especially with a 19-year-old kid who's got everything changing around him, everything's happening so fast, I'm sure he's frustrated because he's not scoring the goals the way that he wants to. Fans are randomly getting on Connor Bedard, even though he's the leading scorer, and there are much bigger problems with this Blackhawks offense than Connor Bedard, quite honestly. I don't want to hear it about Connor Bedard because, hate to be that guy, but that kind of tells me about what you're thinking about this Blackhawks team. It's ignorant in my mind. Anyways, though, but Luke Richardson, to not have even just a partner, not a single line mate for Connor Bedard has been consistent through these opening 17 games. There has been no consistency in this forward group, no consistency in a single forward line. I feel like it's been really hard for these guys to establish chemistry. I think the line that's been together the most this year has probably been Hall, Foligno, and Bertuzzi, and even they've probably only been together for a maximum 6 or 7 games, it feels like. I know the offensive problems are, what's the word I'm looking for? Are concerning enough that Luke Richardson wants to try to solve them right here, right now, and that's why he's tinkering so much. I understand what he's trying to do, but I think it's just really backfired on this team. And the lack of putting players in the right spots consistently has just been so jarring to me. First and foremost, speaking on the Connor Bedard issue, the lack of getting him line mates, why is Luke Richardson willing to put anyone on a line with Connor Bedard that isn't named Tyler Bertuzzi? I know Bertuzzi hasn't gotten off to the best start this year, but I think Bertuzzi has to play with Connor Bedard. You're giving Tyler Bertuzzi all this money in free agency, and you're not going to give him a chance to play with Connor Bedard unless it's on the power play? That, to me, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Freaking Craig Smith and Ryan Donato were playing with Connor Bedard on the top line at one point last night. Why not Tyler Bertuzzi? They connected for a beautiful power play goal a few games ago against the Anaheim Ducks. Why not play them together? Luke Richardson, why will you not give Tyler Bertuzzi a chance there? And also, why will he not give Lukas Reichel consistent top 6 ice time? Lukas Reichel is playing 11, 12, 13 minutes a game, and he is arguably our best skater in the lineup right now, because when he's buzzing right, he is a difference maker out there on the ice for the Blackhawks. And not only is he not out there on the power play, which has no speed, can't get anything set up in the offensive zone because they don't have that speed. They have to dump the puck in and then they lose it because the opponent fires it down the ice. Lukas Reichel has speed. Lukas Reichel has skill. We have to use him in the right situations. And I know things are going well for him with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith. Guess what? It's bad for the Blackhawks if Lukas Reichel is rolling with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith, who he needs to be rolling with. And that not happening is still another issue. But who he needs to be rolling with is real offensive playmakers, man. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. Get Lukas Reichel more ice time. Get Connor Bedard opportunities with Tyler Bertuzzi, because playing with these undersized guys, Philip Kurashev, Teuvo Teravainen, Taylor Hall, it hasn't worked. And Connor Bedard's most success that he's had at the NHL level so far this year and in his career has been with Nick Foligno, a rugged forward who doesn't have a ton of speed, but can go and win loose puck battles, can hound the puck and go and get it back to Connor Bedard so he can play the skill game. There has been such a lack of that in the Blackhawks forward group, and for them to be jumbling it on a nightly basis to not allow anyone to get any chemistry whatsoever, I just don't agree with it. But at the same point in time, while I am pointing fingers at Luke Richardson here and saying, what's the plan for this Blackhawks offense? How are we going to get Connor Bedard going? He doesn't seem to have answers, at least through the opening 17 games. But part of it certainly has to be some of the blame has to be thrown towards three guys in particular: Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev, Tyler Bertuzzi. Four guys in particular, Teuvo Teravainen as well. Hall, Kurashev, Bertuzzi, Teravainen have not been good enough. Not good enough whatsoever. I'll give Taylor Hall a little bit of slack because he's coming off that torn ACL, and getting back to game speed as someone who's known for his skating ability is a little bit difficult. But for Bertuzzi, who has played a little bit better as of late, but it still hasn't been consistent enough for him, Teravainen has been an absolute ghost since starting off the season on a real hot streak. I think he's only got 2 points in the last 12 games that he's played. Absolutely abysmal. Philip Kurashev hasn't been good enough either. Those guys, they deserve a good chunk of the blame as well. It's not just Luke Richardson and his inadequacy to put forward lines together. Well, it is still also on the players to go and execute with the guys out there. And those guys, those big guns for the Blackhawks offense, just aren't executing right now. And I don't think it's a surprise that with those guys struggling to have offensive consistency, Connor Bedard, who's 19 years old and is the head honcho of this Blackhawks team, if he's not getting great help from these guys who the Blackhawks really were expected to lean on for their offense this year, if he's not getting much help for those guys, how are you going to be mad at Connor Bedard? How is he supposed to go and do this thing himself? And again, he's still the Blackhawks leading scorer with 13 points, despite his best weapon being absolutely absent at this point in time. He's still the Blackhawks' best playmaker. He's still their leading scorer. And oh yeah, he's still only 19 years old, and the guy every opposing team has circled going into the game. So it puts Connor Bedard in a real tough situation. But it's on Luke Richardson to be better as a coach and to find offensive trios that work. Get Tyler Bertuzzi up there with Connor Bedard, and also stop micromanaging, Luke. You got to give these guys a couple of games together, all right? You can't be jumbling them up the way that you have been on a by-period basis. And it's also on the players to just be freaking better, man. Just be freaking better. Play with more desperation. Play with more firepower, because it hasn't been good enough. And it's led to this offense looking so inept, basically on a nightly basis at this point in time. And let me tell you, I'm sick of staying up until midnight with the Blackhawks on the West Coast to watch this offense do absolutely nothing. Rant closed. There are my full thoughts and my full frustrations from last night's 3-1 loss to Seattle and just the Blackhawks. Offensive struggles as a whole this year. Coming up in just a moment, before I close out today's episode, I still need to give a shout out to Blackhawks goaltender Petr Mrazek. But first, I got to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action in the second half of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and will have the chance to win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. And FanDuel gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so that when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And I know it's been a struggle for the Chicago Bears here as of late, but if you want to bet on them to pull off a miracle against the Packers this week, or if you want to fade them and take Green Bay just to win some money, either way, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now. And if you're not already a member, make sure to sign up, and you'll have a chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. Again, that's FanDuel.com. Create an account, and you'll have the chance to win $150 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Segment 3, just shout out Petr Mrazek, man. Shout out Petr Mrazek, Blackhawks fans. Like he was last year, he continues to really be the unsung hero of this Blackhawks team. And not only anytime the Blackhawks win, as I referenced on yesterday's episode, anytime the Blackhawks win, you can probably safely assume Petr Mrazek had himself a good night. Well, quite honestly, anytime you go and look at the final score of a Blackhawks game and you see, 3-1, 4-2, something low scoring like that, you can probably assume the Blackhawks were in that game because Petr Mrazek was outstanding. And that's been the case more times than not so far for him early on in the 2024-25 regular season. He's made 13 starts now on the year, Blackhawks fans. Sadly, only has a 5-8-0 record to show for it with a .279 goals against average and .906 save percentage. Numbers that don't really jump off the charts or anything. They are both good for top 30 in the NHL in those respected categories. However, just looking at those numbers doesn't do Petr Mrazek's game so far this year due diligence. If you go and dive a little bit deeper, go and look at the game logs. Petr Mrazek has now allowed 3 goals or fewer in 11 of his 13 starts this year. I mean, he's been on his A game most nights to give the Blackhawks a chance. And a theme I've said many times on the show the last year and a half, I don't want to know what this Blackhawks team would be like watching them if it weren't for Petr Mrazek. I mean, it's still pretty tough to watch them, but at least some of these games are close and semi-entertaining going into the third period because Petr Mrazek's absolutely standing on his head back there. But 11 out of his 13 starts this year, he's given the Blackhawks a chance with the way he's played in goal. And the 2 quote-unquote bad starts that he's had so far this season. One was the season opener in Utah where the Blackhawks looked really piss poor in the opening 40 minutes. Stop me if you've heard that statement before. The other was a game against the Vancouver Canucks. I was in attendance that night. Couldn't really blame it on Petr Mrazek. The Blackhawks got absolutely bullied in front of him, in front of their own goaltender. So quite honestly, I don't think you can say Petr Mrazek has let his team down in any of the 13 games that he's played. He has been phenomenal, even though those numbers won't garner the type of attention or the respect that he really does command for standing on his head time and time again. Another cool number that I had to throw out here on today's show to show some love to Petr Mrazek. Among all goaltenders in the NHL, according to hockeyreference.com, Mrazek is 8th in goalie point shares so far this season, barely trailing guys like Igor Shesterkin, UC Saros, Joey Decord, who we saw last night in Seattle, some of the best goaltenders in the NHL. Petr Mrazek is right there with them. He's also ahead of Jacob Markstrom, who's gotten off to a pretty good start this year. Like, Petr Mrazek is right up there with being one of the best goaltenders. But the save percentage, the goals against, because the Blackhawks are a team that doesn't possess the puck very often, those aren't going to jump off of the page like they really should. But Petr Mrazek, man, has been the MVP of this Blackhawks team so far this year. And some of you may remember he was my co-MVP along with Connor Bedard for the Blackhawks last year, because even though the season, the win results, the points didn't look pretty for the Blackhawks, it could have been a whole lot worse without Petr Mrazek, as is the case again this season. So shout out to Petr Mrazek, man. Hopefully this Blackhawks offense can wake up to give him a little bit more help, because the goaltending has been a strength for this Blackhawks team, and a lot of that is thanks in part to number 34, Petr Mrazek. All right, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2. Make sure, though, to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you can get the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, everyone, yes, there will be an episode coming out tomorrow to preview the matchup in Vancouver. Until then, everyone, have a great and responsible Friday. I can't believe that's even a thing. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.